Scorching steam rose. The sea bubbled as if it were boiling. The flames died down, but the tower was gone. The whole cliff face was crusted in black, like burnt syrup. The dragon still circled above, and Dokuro sat on its bony back, looking down. He was almost certain that Cyrus and the Auror had not survived. He let out a long, relieved sigh. The dragon was being controlled by another goblin. It had been secretly raised by the goblin since it was a hatchling. With the goblins' resources, smuggling a dragon cub was not difficult, and the silent silver whistle Dokuro had blown earlier wasn't so much a whistle as a magical summoning device. "How many wands did you get?" the goblin asked. Dokuro hesitated when wands were mentioned. The wand in his hand was the only one he had, a defective thing Luke Wood had given him, worn by its previous owner until the core showed. He hadn't had a chance to take the wands Cyrus had set out, and by now those were probably ash from the dragon's flames. "Only one," he admitted. "They lied to us," the goblin flying the dragon grumbled. "They promised at least 50 wands and didn't deliver." He didn't mention that they'd planned to turn on Luke Wood and his group. "Wizards can't be trusted. We always knew that." "It would have been enough to trade that vault secret for wands," Dokuro muttered. "If only we could decipher Lanlok's manuscript, we could read ancient magic. The secret of Vault 12 will never be revealed to us. It's enough if we can use this secret to force the wizards to give us what's ours," another goblin said, glancing up as dark clouds gathered. Purple lightning flickered in their faces, and the sea-swept sky grew heavy. The dragon's breath had vaporized a lot of seawater, but it couldn't possibly have made thunderclouds across the whole sky. The goblin shrugged. "The weather near the sea's like this sometimes." "Let's go back," Dokuro said. "An Auror died here. Best not to let the Ministry of Magic discover we were involved." The goblin nodded. They'd done plenty of illegal things before. Being found out wasn't ideal, but this wasn't the night to tangle with the Ministry. He tugged the magic reins and the dragon flapped up. A dragon trained from a young age is like an elephant, capable of breaking free, but cruelly taught to obey. The creature was covered in scars, a Norwegian ridgeback. Its scales had strong magical resistance and could shrug off non-magical attacks. That was why you trained them when they were young. Pain taught obedience. But tonight the dragon was different. A tremendous bolt of lightning ripped through the sky. Heavy rain slid along the dragon's rugged scales. The beast stiffened, restless, twisting anxiously in the air and roaring at the clouds. "Quiet, you beast." The goblin snapped, lashing its back. Dokuro, wand in hand, conjured a whip and struck as well. The dragon wouldn't calm. Even whip strikes over its wounds couldn't quiet it. Dokuro and the goblin were nearly thrown from its back several times. "Dokuro, you just got a wand. Give it a conjunctivitis curse. Make it feel pain," the goblin barked, gripping the bony spines along the dragon's back and wiping rain from his face. Dokuro didn't want to. He didn't pity the dragon, but he felt uneasy. "Adora, is there something in the clouds?" he asked. Adora peered into the storm and saw nothing at first. If anything in Britain could gather such vast dark clouds, it would normally be Dementors. "Has the search reached this far?" "If it's those." "No, it's not Dementors," Dokuro shouted. In the lightning's glare, he'd seen a flash of gold moving through the clouds. "It's a thunderbird," his voice cut through the rain. Adora's face went even grimmer. A thunderbird was an X-level menace on par with a dragon. Related to the phoenix but far larger and far more destructive, thunderbirds usually lived in the Americas and did not migrate. One appearing in Scotland suggested a wizard had smuggled it, and an angry thunderbird was something else entirely. He wasn't wrong. The golden shape was furious, and it wasn't anger at smuggling that drove it. This thunderbird was angry because it had been hit by the dragon's breath. It was Cyrus. A few minutes earlier, when the ridgeback had appeared above him, Cyrus had acted immediately. Dokuro, helped by his magic resistance, had apparated onto the dragon's back, but Cyrus had had to take tonks with him, which took time. That delay had made Dokuro think Cyrus had been turned to ash. In truth, his hair had only been singed. Now the Thunderbird was back, and it was his turn to strike. Dokuro and Adora were desperate. They had no desire to take on an enraged adult Thunderbird. There was nothing to be gained and everything to lose. Escape was the only sensible option, but lightning moves faster than thought. Cyrus dove like a streak of pure electricity. His talons raked at the two goblins before they could react. The Norwegian Ridgeback hadn't realized Cyrus wasn't attacking it at first. It only registered the threat and lashed out. It twisted its body to dodge, opened its venomous jaws, and snapped for Cyrus's throat. Cyrus didn't meet it head-on. The dragon's magic resistance was formidable. A brute force clash would be unwise. His edge lay in superior magic and sharper tactics. He rode the wind like a predator in water, slipping through strikes and finding an opening. In an instant, he pecked at one of the dragon's eyes. The beast screamed, thrashing in pain. Black blood spurted from the wound and slashed its tail and claws wildly. Flames sprayed from its mouth like a broken sprinkler. Cyrus followed immediately with lightning. The current tore through scale and sinew. The dragon's hide blistered and blackened, wounds opening across its body. Dokuro, who had meant to use his wand to help the dragon counterattack, had no chance to act. He clung to the creature's spine for dear life, vision blurred by high-speed flight, feeling stinging gusts and sharp scales striking him like shrapnel. Half of one ear was ripped away. The next strike hit the dragon's wing. The beast howled and pitched, tumbling toward the sea. The ocean exploded into a crimson splash. The force of the struggle hurled Dokuro and Adora off the dragon's back. Cyrus beat his wings, whipping the clouds into storm, and swept back toward the two goblins. A bolt of lightning singed Adora to charcoal. Cyrus's talons closed around Dokuro, lifting him into the air. His wand had fallen somewhere in the chaos. Blood ran from his torn ear. Cyrus showed no mercy. He flung Dokuro like a rag doll onto the cliff above the bay. Dokuro hit the rock and screamed. He guessed he'd broken at least 7 ribs, and his arm was shattered. Then, to Dokuro's astonishment, the great thunderbird folded its wings. Its enormous shape shrank and reshaped until a tall man stood where the bird had been. Golden hair caught the sea breeze. Candle-bright eyes regarded him. Cyrus, Dokuro, who had been forbidden a wand and taught that wizards could not transform into magical beasts, felt the world tilt. This defied everything he'd been taught. "You say impossible to magic?" Cyrus asked, stepping lightly. He looked impossibly calm for someone who had just fought a dragon. From where Dokuro lay, he seemed almost casual, though the truth was clear enough. Cyrus had chosen the smart strikes, exploited the dragon's weaknesses, and used skill and cunning rather than brute force. That intelligence had made all the difference. Fear flooded Dokuro. "Sir," he croaked, letting pain make his pleading look genuine. "I'll tell you everything in Landloke's manuscript. Just please, spare me." Cyrus's face held mock regret. "I prefer you defiant, Mr. Dokuro," he said. "I'm afraid I can't risk that you'll tell others my secret." Dokuro's face went white. "But if you kill me, the manuscript—" "Oh, don't worry." Cyrus lifted a wand between 2 fingers and pressed its tip against Dokuro's temple. A thin, silvery filament, like a hair or a tiny parasite, was drawn out. It was Dokuro's memory. "I don't need your voice to know your deepest secrets." Dokuro went blank. He slumped, eyes unfocused, like someone whose soul had been emptied. Powerful wizards could extract memories directly. It was brutal and seldom done, because it could maim the mind, leaving the victim a hollow shell. For someone who was already doomed, it mattered little. Cyrus stowed the memory carefully and then set the coastline alight, burning what needed to be burned and erasing traces of magic as thoroughly as he could. The dragon, though grievously wounded, still fought in the sea, gasping and struggling. Cyrus paused, thinking. Dragons were rare and valuable. Most were protected and nearly impossible to obtain. He would not kill this one. He intended to keep it and study it, its magic and its power. Perhaps he should get a suitcase like Newt's, he mused. He would need a way to transport and contain such a creature. Later, at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, Tonks came awake slowly. "Hiss! My head!" She squinted up into the bright ceiling and tried to focus. "Where am I?" "The hospital." Moody sat a short distance away and answered in his usual clipped tone when he saw she'd woken. Tonks's panic leapt. "How did I get here? Where are the dark wizards? Where are the goblins? Where is Tom Riddle?" Before Moody could reply, a woman with a familiar, irritating smile settled into the chair beside him. Cyrus, in another guise, the Dolores persona he'd assumed. She plopped a newspaper into Tonks's lap. "The dark wizards and the goblins are dead," she said dryly. "Tom Riddle escaped." Tonks stared down at the printed words. The front page told the story of the battle. 123. You'll regret it, Dumbledore. Bang! Snape stormed into the headmaster's office and slammed a copy of the Daily Prophet down in front of Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his colleague's step, and raised an eyebrow. Look what you've done, Dumbledore. Dumbledore took the paper and read it through slowly. After a long moment, he set it down, interlaced his fingers, and regarded Snape with a puzzled expression. I'm sorry, Severus. I don't see what you mean. There's nothing here that concerns me. You can say that. Snape snapped, snatching the paper back like a snake. If not for your false mercy, Tom Riddle would already be dead. You said you-know-who would return and ordered me to keep that arrogant child safe. But what about you? You had a chance to kill him months ago. Do you forget that night? What did you do instead? Sent him to Azkaban? What on earth were you thinking? Fairy tales. So you already know Riddle's identity? Dumbledore asked calmly. You can't expect stupid minds to keep secrets, Snape muttered through his teeth, his voice tight with the memory of pride thoughts. Reading a student at will is hardly polite, Severus. You should say that to yourself, Snape interrupted with a short, bitter laugh that split his face. I need no lessons in propriety. He was trembling with anger. Dumbledore inclined his head, then spoke gently. Regarding the identity of the resurrected Tom Riddle, at first I believed him to be Lord Voldemort beyond question, but now I have doubts. Doubts? Snape's voice was incredulous. There can't be two Lord Voldemorts in the world at once, Dumbledore. Even with a time-turner, two people like that could never meet. My point exactly, Dumbledore said, his tone grave. And yet my intelligence reports that Lord Voldemort has only just left Albania. Snape's outrage dissolved into confusion, then deepened again. So you've split you-know-who in two? Great, truly worthy of the greatest wizard in the world, Snape muttered, as if the idea made him sick. There is a difference, Severus, Dumbledore said softly. Tom Riddle, perhaps it would be better to call him Cyrus, is not the same as Lord Voldemort. They look the same to me, Snape said sarcastically. Terrorizing Hogwarts, breaking into the Ministry, blowing up half the coastline. What difference is there in that? The difference is intention, Dumbledore replied. Cyrus is benevolent. Benevolent, Snape barked. He killed 9 wizards and 1 goblin. They were 9 dark wizards and 1 goblin who sought to incite rebellion, Dumbledore said firmly. To those who prey on the innocent, he has acted in a way that looks, comparatively, like benevolence. I do not call him kind. I only say he seems to lack Voldemort's malice. He has not summoned Death Eaters since his return, as far as my reports show. Snape pressed his fingers into the inside of his left arm as if to steady himself. Perhaps he simply bided his time. Lily's magic had no effect on him. Dumbledore's half-moon spectacles caught the light. When Lily protected Harry, it kept Voldemort, through Quirrell, unable to touch the boy in his first year. Cyrus could touch him, and he never intended to harm Harry. Snape was silent a long time, then said in a low, cautious voice, he could still be a threat. Of course he could, Dumbledore agreed quietly. But if he is not of the same mind as Lord Voldemort, we can use him against Voldemort. Living allies are often more useful than hollow ones. He sat back behind his desk, looking for all the world like an ordinary old man, but Snape felt the chill of something far more formidable. Snape had no satisfying answer. The plan struck him as reckless. What if Cyrus allied with Voldemort? What if this benevolence was a mask? He wanted to press Dumbledore on every possibility, but he only managed to leave one parting warning. You will regret this, Dumbledore. He turned and left as abruptly as he had come. Meanwhile, Harry, Hermione, and Ron had been following every report of Cyrus's actions with keen interest, collecting copies of the Daily Prophet as they appeared. Tom Riddle killed 9 dark wizards off the coast of Scotland, Hermione said, folding the paper carefully and frowning. What is wrong with Mr. Cyrus? He actually killed people? Harry jumped in. Of course not. Hermione immediately shook her head. I mean, he should at least keep a low profile. Harry gave her a surprised look. He hadn't expected Hermione to defend secrecy. Don't overthink it, Harry, Ron said around a bite of bacon toast. Those dark wizards deserved it. The paper says they were planning to sacrifice an Auror. If it weren't for Mr. Cyrus, she might be dead. And the goblin, Hermione added. The goblins in the records are ruthless, greedy, starting rebellions that cost many lives. They wanted wands this time. If they'd got them, who knows what would have happened. Didn't you read about the Pig's Head Bar Goblin Rebellion in History of Magic? That was bloody. Those dark wizards would all have been Death Eaters if you know who hadn't fallen, Ron muttered. He grew quieter, then leaned in. By the way, Harry, what about that thing Cyrus mentioned to you? The prophecy? Hermione's ears pricked up. I thought you three were in class together, she said. Harry rolled his eyes. I haven't heard anything serious, apart from that ill omen. There was one more. She said today, October 16th, your greatest fear would come true. Harry glanced across the great hall. A girl named Draven sat nearby, sobbing over a letter. Her pet rabbit had been killed by a fox, and she was convinced that was her worst fear. Ron shivered at the mention of the omen. Hermione snorted. If Cyrus said anything wrong, he probably just confused it with Sybil Trelawney, Hermione said sharply. Her prophecies are rubbish. Professor McGonagall says she predicts one person's death every year. You don't take omens seriously, Hermione, Ron snapped. This concerns Harry's life. My uncle saw an ill omen and then he died. And Scabbers, how many times have I told you to keep an eye on that rat? Your uncle scared himself to death, Hermione replied coolly. And Draven only got the letter today. Her rabbit must have died days ago. What's Harry's biggest fear anyway? Seeing Cyrus's name in the paper? I don't want to argue with you, Hermione, Ron said sharply. You should pay more attention to other people's concerns. He turned back to Harry. You should tell Cyrus about the diary. Go and borrow it from Ginny. Hermione's face flushed red with anger, but she fell silent, partly because if she could get hold of the diary, she might be able to speak to Cyrus herself. But how am I going to tell Ginny? She values that diary more than anything, Harry said, the words coming out with difficulty. To be honest, I already feel awful about keeping Mr. Cyrus's situation from her. That was at Mr. Cyrus's request, Ron said. Honestly, even though Ginny is my sister, I completely understand him. If there was a girl chattering in my ear 24 hours a day, I'd go mad too. He glanced at Harry, and she still writes in that diary from time to time. You two simply don't understand girls, Hermione sighed, shaking her head. She stood. Let me go. I can tell her I need to borrow the diary for study notes. With that, she left. Ron leaned in close to Harry's ear. I bet she just wants to get to talk to Mr. Cyrus herself. You should say less, Harry muttered, poking him with an elbow. The tension between Ron and Hermione had been getting to him. Crookshanks kept staring down Ron's rat, Scabbers, and the two of them argued constantly. Harry often came back exhausted from training, only to be caught between them. Tonks, Dolores, I need both of you to tell me exactly what happened, Scrimgeour said, his voice brisk. Scrimgeour, now head of the Auror office, had arrived with Fudge shortly after Tonks came to. The moment he stepped into the ward, he barked for a clear account. Fudge pushed forward, clutching his green hat under his arm. Wait a moment, he said. Professor Dumbledore said he's on his way. He wants to hear some details himself. Let's wait. Dumbledore coming. Mr. Cyrus straightened in his chair. Facing that old man made everyone uneasy. Dumbledore's gaze seemed to pierce beyond appearances, as if he could see the smallest secrets sheltered in a person's heart. Mr. Cyrus had had little time to modify Tonks's memory after subduing that dragon. By the time the Aurors arrived, whatever could be hidden had to stand on its own. Dumbledore arrived a moment later, walking with light, calm steps. He was very tall, his beard long and silver, and his presence carried that rare mixture of benignity and authority. His eyes swept the room and seemed to pause, ever so slightly, on Mr. Cyrus. The feeling of being inspected made Mr. Cyrus shift in his seat, but outwardly he remained composed. Dumbledore stopped by Tonks's bed. How are you feeling, Nymphadora? He asked kindly. Mr. Cyrus rose from one of the chairs and offered it to him. Thank you, Dumbledore said as he sat. Tonks waved a hand. I'm all right, Professor Dumbledore. It wasn't a major injury, similar to Aurors who've been stunned at the Ministry before. It just took the hospital some time to break the curse. Moody, standing nearby, glanced at Scrimgeour and then at Dumbledore. There was an old camaraderie with Scrimgeour, Fudge less so. Dumbledore listened, then smiled faintly. He had been watching Mr. Cyrus with increasing curiosity. There was something about him that wasn't like Tom Riddle. At Hogwarts, Mr. Cyrus might have been afraid enough not to kill, but since leaving the school he had acted erratically and yet had not killed many people, mostly eliminating a circle of dark wizards. That was odd, Dumbledore thought. He was also puzzled why Mr. Cyrus had turned up on the coast of Scotland. Miss Tonks, please tell me exactly what you saw, Dumbledore asked. Tonks glanced at Mr. Cyrus, then spoke carefully. She had only graduated a few years earlier, and Dumbledore still carried the authority of the headmaster. Dolores and I were originally staking out the Hog's Head, she said. But Dolores probably got bored and started going to the 3 broomsticks every day to, well, flirt with Madame Rosmerta. Mr. Cyrus blinked. When did I flirt with Madame Rosmerta? He thought, feeling the eyes in the ward settle on him. Tonks's face had the triumphant look of someone who had said exactly what was on her mind. Mr. Cyrus knew he needed to explain himself. Dumbledore's smile tightened and he asked, Is that so, Dolores? Moody's tone was already unfriendly. One hand tightened on his walking stick, as if he could use it the moment he didn't like the answer. Scrimgeour looked severe, but more controlled. Of course not, Mr. Cyrus said quickly. From the start, I suspected the goblins and the dark wizard were on high alert. I'm not Tonks. If I'd been seen in the bar every day, it would have aroused suspicion. I'm not skilled at transfiguration, and I didn't leave the area. I stayed hidden the whole time. I was following behind Tonks, otherwise I couldn't have saved her. You were following me? Tonks looked surprised. But the bartender at the Hog's Head said you only returned to the bar in the evening, Moody said, his eyes narrowing. Fudge chimed in, fanning the suspicion. The bartender told the ministry there was a missing Auror, and that the other Auror who was with her hadn't returned for a long time. Dumbledore tilted his head, watching Mr. Cyrus with an expression that was part amusement, part inquiry. Mr. Cyrus stayed calm. That's the thing, he said. That afternoon, I didn't go into any shops. I stayed hidden the whole time. You could check with any shopkeeper in Hogsmeade. What did you do then? Dumbledore prompted. I spent the afternoon at the Shrieking Shack, Mr. Cyrus said. It served as my alibi. He went on to explain. Later, when he realized Tonks was following the dark wizard alone, he tailed her covertly. As for the person who'd appeared at the Hog's Head that evening, Mr. Cyrus looked at Dumbledore. He believed that explained why Tom Riddle was seen on the Scottish coast that night. You mean the you seen at the Hog's Head in the evening was actually Tom Riddle in disguise? Dumbledore asked softly. I'm afraid so, Mr. Cyrus replied. Dumbledore's eyes held his for a long moment, weighing the explanation. Around them, the Aurors exchanged looks, each trying to reconcile the pieces of a strange, dangerous puzzle. Lily Potter was silent. Things seem clear now, Dumbledore said, stressing the word seem. Fudge's face clouded. He pressed a pudgy hand to his face and turned to Cyrus. So you're saying Tom Riddle has been in Hogsmeade this whole time? I'm afraid so, Cyrus nodded calmly. That set Fudge off. He shrieked as if the very idea had set him alight. Impossible. Dementors patrol Hogsmeade twice a day. Twice. Do you understand? Whether it's Sirius Black or Tom Riddle, if they showed up in Hogsmeade, they'd be caught immediately. Cornelius, it seems the Dementors can't track those two, Dumbledore said. Sirius Black and Tom Riddle escaped from Azkaban. They've clearly found a way to evade Dementor tracking. They should stay away from Hogwarts. But, Albus, if that's true, who will catch those two dangerous escapees? Fudge's voice softened, but he did not back down. He'd always distrusted the Azkaban guards. For a mediocre man like him, the idea of change was frightening. He stammered, but the conversation moved on, and Tonks resumed her story. Later they knocked me out. When I came to, the dark wizards and the goblins were preparing to sacrifice me. Then Tom Riddle appeared. He subdued the dark wizards without even casting a spell. He made me faint without a wand. What's clear is the goblins were after wands. The dark wizards wanted ancient magic. Tom Riddle was interested in ancient magic too. Dumbledore's blue eyes turned to Cyrus, and his expression suggested a thought left unspoken. It seems his power has grown since the last time. I didn't expect secrets of ancient magic to be hidden in a place like that, Moody said. Is ancient magic really that powerful? Dumbledore considered. It's hard to say exactly. There are certainly ancient charms and curses with enormous destructive potential. He paused and then explained further. Magic isn't like technology. Technology advances continually, and destructive weapons, once invented, can be preserved and used again. Spells, however, vanish with the death of the witch or wizard who knew them. Even if written down, they're limited by the caster's power. Many potent magics have been lost because there was no suitable inheritor. With fewer large-scale wars in the wizarding world, the most destructive curses fell out of use. Most magic today is practical, domestic. In time, dark curses like fiendfire and even the killing curse may come to be remembered only as ancient magic. Dumbledore wasn't surprised that Tom Riddle would chase ancient magic. After all, more than a decade ago, he himself had once been defeated by an ancient magic called love. Ancient magic is very powerful, Fudge said. There's even a special room in the Department of Mysteries that seals away an ancient magic. I remember. Lily Potter worked there as an unspeakable for a while, didn't she? Cyrus's head snapped up. Lily Potter had been an unspeakable? Surprise flickered across his face. Dumbledore nodded. Yes, before she married James, she did research in the Department of Mysteries. Later, as Voldemort and the Death Eaters grew bolder, she joined the Aurors and fought with the Order of the Phoenix. You mean the locked room? The one filled with love? Cyrus asked. He had been through some rooms in the department before, but had deliberately left well-locked doors alone. Dumbledore met his gaze. Yes, it seems her research there had some success. Fudge brightened and leaned forward. Then did she leave anything? Scrimgeour abruptly coughed, cutting him off. His face was flat and gray. I don't think this is the place to discuss the Department of Mysteries, he said. Oh, yes, yes! Fudge realized his slip and mopped his brow with a handkerchief. The subject stopped, but the idea had already taken root in Cyrus's mind like a seed. Lily Potter had researched ancient magic and had used it to defeat Lord Voldemort. Had she left manuscripts? Had she recorded her discoveries? Cyrus stole a glance at Dumbledore and found the headmaster smiling serenely. For a second, his heart tightened. Was it a trap? Had Dumbledore seen through his disguise? He tensed and instinctively tightened his grip on his wand, then remembered he was in a hospital and relaxed. Dumbledore could not duel him here. Dolores, why are you staring off into space? Fudge barked, annoyed at Cyrus's silence. Everyone's waiting for you. Cyrus realized Dumbledore had only been waiting for him to continue the story, not because he had exposed him. He let out a small breath and carried on. Then the fighting started. The goblins blew a silver whistle and summoned a Norwegian ridgeback they'd been keeping secret. Those lawless scoundrels, Moody swore. So Tom Riddle fought the dragon, and the wizards and goblins all joined in. I took advantage of the confusion to get Tonks out, couldn't stay longer. By the time I came back, the battle was over. Tom Riddle was gone. The dragon was gone. The dark wizards and goblins were gone. Only a ruined stretch of coastline remained. Moody nodded. We did find a small amount of dragon blood in the sea. Do you think Tom Riddle was killed by the dragon? Fudge asked hopefully. He wanted the escaped convict brought to justice, even dead. I'm afraid I have to disappoint you, Cornelius. Dumbledore shook his head. He stood, preparing to leave after saying goodbye to Tonks, then paused by Cyrus. He turned and fixed the younger man with his wise eyes. Mr. Dolores, could we step aside? There are some matters I should discuss with you in private. 126. Goblin's Memory. Cyrus followed Dumbledore out of the ward and halted in the hospital corridor. Pharmacists and nurses in white cloaks hurried past. Patients groaned under spells. Hardly a place for conversation. Dumbledore waved his wand, and the noise vanished as if by magic, leaving the two of them alone and oddly removed from the world. Mr. Dolores, about Tom Riddle, or shall I call you Cyrus? During the trial, he could only say that one sentence. I think we should respect his wishes. Dumbledore gave a playful wink. Cyrus couldn't tell what the old man was angling for and felt a chill. You said you tailed Miss Tonks while she tracked the goblin and the dark wizard? Dumbledore asked. Yes, sir. So you watched their movements all afternoon in secret? Yes, sir. The dark wizards and the goblin captured Tonks, but they didn't strike right away. They waited until nightfall, as if the sacrificial ritual needed moonlight to be completed. Cyrus kept his voice steady. That's not easy to detect, Dumbledore said, nodding. Traces of ancient magic don't show themselves to everyone. He didn't linger on that. Instead, he pivoted to a sharper question. Dolores, you saw Cyrus's form and his fighting. What kind of person do you think he is? Cyrus stiffened. I don't know, sir. I only saw him from a distance and witnessed how powerful he was. Dumbledore listened, then asked a different, quieter question. And you, Dolores? Are you all right? Any injuries? No, sir. Silence fell. The distant groans and hospital noises seeped back in, and the strange, anticlimactic interview was over. Dumbledore's figure disappeared down the stairwell, and Cyrus was left puzzling over what conclusion the headmaster had drawn from him. He walked back to Tonks's ward with a knot of unease in his stomach. His borrowed identity felt fragile, and he suspected Dumbledore had been probing, not out of simple curiosity, but to test whether this Cyrus endangered the real Dolores. The old man had known enough not to expose him outright. That realization eased Cyrus. As long as Dumbledore didn't move to eliminate him, things would be tolerable. Maybe Dumbledore had discerned a difference between this revived soul and the Lord Voldemort he once knew, or perhaps he planned to watch longer to see what changes the resurrected soul would bring. Either way, Cyrus didn't want to become some great destructive tyrant. He only needed enough freedom to pursue his own ends. He braced himself to be tested. Dumbledore would surely try all manner of means to confirm his suspicions, but as long as the tests stayed indirect, Cyrus could manage. Back in the ward, Fudge and Scrimgeour were arguing heatedly about the goblin affair. Scrimgeour was furious about Dokuro's collaboration with the Dark Wizard to obtain a wand, and given the bloody history of goblin rebellions, wanted to crack down hard. Fudge opposed immediate suppression without solid evidence. The goblins controlled a lot of wealth, and he didn't want to stir up trouble. After the Dark Ages, the British wizarding world was desperate for stability. Fudge preferred negotiation, maintain the Goblin Liaison Office, talk to the Goblin Brotherhood, and avoid language that would inflame tensions. Let's drop this for now, he said, switching to a more conciliatory tone. Tonks and Dolores, both of you should rest. Take some time off. He gave a sympathetic look. Dolores, haven't you been home in ages? Your wife must miss you. And Tonks, we haven't told your parents about your hospitalization. It might be best if you go home and spend some time with them. Grumbling, Scrimgeour left with Fudge's arm hooked around his shoulder, the two of them heading off to negotiate. Moody shook his head in disgust. Such a man became minister, huh? Cyrus didn't linger at the hospital. Moody, an old widower, could keep watch over Tonks. Tonks might even be discharged the next day. With nothing pressing to do, Cyrus returned to Dolores's house. Dolores's attractive wife rushed over to greet him, effusive and relieved. Cyrus slipped a confundus charm under her reaction to blur her certainty. Dusting off other worries, he continued to think about Lily Potter being an unspeakable and the possibility she had left behind manuscripts on ancient magic, like Lan Lokes. Perhaps he should visit Godric's Hollow. It wasn't urgent. Godric's Hollow was only a lead. The closest thing to ancient magic right now seemed to be Lan Lokes manuscripts. The magical world had plainly diverged in places from the legacy. Cyrus remembered. Hogwarts had not taken transfer students since the Triwizard tournament ended, but many characters and villains from that version were historical figures here. Lan Loke had indeed been a real goblin, and records showed Professor Fig had died en route to take up his post at Hogwarts, becoming the first professor to die before even beginning. Cyrus took a clean glass vial and removed the silvery threads inside. He reached out and grasped a memory. It rippled, like a feather dropped into a gray lake, and sank slowly into his mind. He didn't need a pensieve. The memory unspooled directly before him. Dokuro's recollection mattered little. What Cyrus sought was Lan Lokes' manuscript. In the silver-gray world of the memory, an ancient scroll unfurled before him like an ink painting. It was an old piece of parchment. Goblins couldn't use magic, and the manuscript was threaded with the stains of age. Cyrus watched a cross-eyed goblin roughly seize it, ferocious of face, less than a meter tall, standing on a high gilded platform and looking down at the others with insolent pride. From Dokuro's memories, Cyrus recognized him. Boderick, the current leader of the Goblin Brotherhood. The Brotherhood, radical and hungry for rights, had Boderick as one of its most extreme voices. He held the manuscript and prowled the platform like a proud rooster, trying to make himself seem taller. To human eyes, the posture was ridiculous, but the goblins who followed him saw only authority. Cyrus felt like a single bright color in a gray world, out of place and yet oddly at home among these wraiths. When he walked through the crowd, the goblins seemed to part like smoke and then close again behind him. Every pair of eyes fixed on him glinted with greed, longing, and a kind of worship. "Brothers, look at this," Boderick cried, hoisting Lanloke's manuscript so every gaze snapped to it, lingering on the ancient scroll. A mischievous spark flashed in his eyes. Before anyone could answer, he supplied the name himself. "This is something left by that great goblin Lanloke." At the name Lanloke, the assembled goblins froze, then a river of hatred broke loose. Fists clenched, sharp nails bit into rough palms. "That traitor! Liar! Thief!" The curses rolled through the crowd like a tide. Cyrus watched Dokuro's face tighten, as if he wanted to tear Lanloke apart. Though Cyrus had not played the old tales much, he knew of Lanloke as the goblin leader of a past age, but a century after, the reverence in that title had curdled into scorn. Great Goblin was now an insult, full of irony. Cyrus wanted to know why, and Boderick obligingly provided the explanation. "That's right, that liar, that betrayer, that despicable, shameless thief who stole our sacred goblin artifact and vanished." Boderick slammed the manuscript down, as if discarding refuse. "He told us goblins didn't need wands, that we could gain power stronger than wizardry. He promised ancient magic." Ancient magic, Cyrus thought. The word sounded almost mythical. "But it was a scam," Boderick went on, voice crackling. "It wasn't something ordinary people could learn. We couldn't learn it. Lanloke couldn't learn it. Only a handful of wizards ever understood its secrets. Still, he fed us those illusions. We poured every coin into forging a set of powerful goblin armor that would lead us to glory, let us beat the wizards and take back what's ours. And then that liar stole it." Boderick's anger was a living thing. Since the uprising in the 18th century, the goblins had not mounted another open revolt. The Ministry of Magic thought that handing full control of Gringotts to the goblins had mollified them, but one vault did not stem their hunger. After Gringotts came a new obsession, warlike ambition, poured into a single goal, powerful armor. But Lanloke had taken it, promising to return greater than ever, and then disappeared. Without the armor, the goblins went quiet again, biding their time. In goblin eyes, Lanloke became the ultimate sinner, a traitor who robbed them of their chance to supplant wizards. "I know some among us followed him," Boderick said, raising a finger that looked like a dry, peeling branch topped with a thick nut-like nail. As he swept that finger across the crowd, a few very old goblins bowed their heads shamefully. "Never mind, brothers. You were deceived." His fury cooled into a soothing, stubborn calm that steadied those who felt shame. Resentment hardened into resolve before their eyes. "Lanloke is a greedy thief. He hoarded the secrets of ancient magic and stole our treasure. Maybe even now he lounges somewhere, stroking that artifact and freely unleashing tremendous power." "But," a goblin in the crowd whispered, trembling as he raised a hand, "you said that magic was a scam. You said no one could learn it." A hush fell. "Yes, I said that," Boderick nodded gravely. "Actually, before I found Lanloke's manuscript, I believed it. But," he let the word hang, "if the manuscript records how to control ancient magic, then perhaps it's real." Eyes lit up again. Desire stirred in the crowd. Boderick held them just enough to keep them from rushing headlong into another disaster. "Perhaps it is real," he said. "Perhaps it is not. Brothers, I believe one day we will unravel its mysteries. But not yet. Not until we reclaim the status that rightfully belongs to us." His reasoning was simple and sharp. Ancient magic might be genuine, but a goblin who can't even wield a wand is like a thirsty traveler in the desert finding a pile of biscuits. Useful, perhaps, but not what will save you. What they needed now was the basic tool of magic, wands. "I believe the wizards will be very interested," Boderick said, voice wary and calculating. "We can use this as a bargaining chip." "You mean give the clue to the wizards?" a goblin snarled, offended. To many of them, trade sounded dangerously like give away. "Of course not, bowlegs," Boderick replied with a sly smile. "Trade. Remember the dragons I raise." 128. Dragon's Blood and Brandy Cyrus watched the goblins erupt into a frenzy. They cheered Boderick's plan with an almost religious fervor, ecstatic at the thought of tricking the wizards. They never wanted to make a genuine deal from the start, and Luke Wood had been the same in those days, incompetent, arrogant, and blind to how dangerous the goblins were. If Cyrus hadn't appeared when he did, they might all have ended up dead under a dragon's jaws. "Let those wizards know we are not ugly fairies," Boderick cried, raising his arms. Hundreds of goblins mirrored him, fists clenched in unison. "We are not ugly fairies." The sound washed over the room like a wave and then shattered the scene. Cyrus rematerialized in another chamber. Fewer goblins were here, but Derek stood oddly neat in a suit jacket that looked wrong on his odd, compact frame. A small group stood before him, among them Dokuro. "Dokuro, I found a suitable set of collaborators," Boderick said, pushing a manuscript across the table. "I need you to contact them." He tapped the cover. "They're descendants of the Luke Wood family. Their ancestor was once a guardian of ancient magic. I think they'll be very interested." Dokuro took the manuscript and began to read. Cyrus drifted closer, and only now could he make out the pages clearly. Boderick explained their scheme in a dry voice. "You'll take them to the coastline in Scotland, to the ruined tower. Adora will be waiting with a dragon, lying in ambush." "But how do we make them believe it?" someone asked. "Lanloke's manuscript records a bloody ritual," Boderick replied. "It's a method that reveals traces of ancient magic. That must be what Lanloke was chasing. It's a pity I can't read any further. The back is a mess. The handwriting and the stains have ruined it. Apparently Lanloke eventually mastered some of the ancient magic, but I can't tell how. And the whereabouts of Vault 12 are unknown." He tapped the book with a bitter little laugh. "Lanloke planned to strike at the unspeakables in the Ministry to seize the key to Vault 12. He vanished before he could. The key disappeared with him. Whatever ancient magic is, it's probably hidden inside Vault 12. "It's maddening," Dokuro muttered. "Those wizards preach fairness. They say they'll let us control the vault, but in the end, we still need their permission to open it." His face was thick with fury, as if every coin and secret in Gringotts belonged exclusively to the goblins. Cyrus had long suspected Vault 12 contained clues to ancient magic. He'd gone to great lengths to track down the key's trail. What surprised him now wasn't the vault's existence, but where the key had ended up. Lanloke, it seemed, had hidden the key inside the bloody pig's head that hung over the door of the hogshead. Of all places. He had actually gone into Vault 12 and, according to the manuscript, found nothing he wanted, only a few guardians who claimed to protect the place. It wasn't hard to picture those guardians refusing to entrust their secrets to a goblin. Having suffered whatever torment the vault held, Lanloke put the key in the pig's head, stole goblin armor, and disappeared. After that, the manuscript became unreadable. Even so, Cyrus still intended to go to Vault 12 himself. Unlike Lanloke, he believed he could inherit ancient magic and become a new guardian. The memories he had were fragmented, but enough to convince him the vault could not be what the game made it out to be. In the game, it had been a tutorial dungeon. In reality, a vault guarded that tightly could not be protecting just a pensieve. The idea that the Guardians had gone to such lengths only to preserve a single memory was absurd. Now that he knew where the key was hidden, the problem was getting it away from Aberforth's sight. Aberforth Dumbledore was no ordinary man. Perhaps not as famous as his brother Albus, but no less dangerous in his own way. He had fought in Dumbledore and Grindelwald's battle at school age, after all. Cyrus thought Aberforth's power might rival his own. He had a son, Credence, whose magic was dangerous and strange. Credence had learned to control the obscurus within him. Cyrus suspected the phoenix that perched beside Dumbledore might once have belonged to Credence. Having gathered what he needed from the manuscript, Cyrus wasted no time. He apparated straight to Hogsmeade. The Hog's Head looked the same at first glance, but business had been slow. The three broomsticks did a steady trade. The Hog's Head, by contrast, had become a refuge for odd and ugly things. If 10 of its customers were unpleasant, it often felt like 11. Rumors of Auror patrols and roaming dementors kept most sensible folk away. Aberforth didn't care. So long as a wizard could still lift his wand, food would find him one way or another. He sat behind the bar, pouring a drink for an ancient wizard with no teeth, who sat reading the Quibbler and grinning at its oddities. The old man had been the Hogshead's only regular for days, immune to the nightly patrols and the chill of Dementors. Aberforth barely glanced up when the door opened. He grumbled without looking. "It's not your patrol time yet." "Sorry," the newcomer said, "but I'm not a Dementor." A stranger stood in the doorway, dry and composed against the bar's gloom. He walked up to the counter and with a courteous nod asked, "How about a brandy? It would be even better with a little fresh dragon's blood." 129. Voldemort. The newcomer was young, but his face was pale and sickly. An old man reading a newspaper looked up, narrowed his eyes, and murmured, "An old friend has returned." Aberforth didn't remember ever seeing that face in the Hogshead before. Most wizards who came here hid their true appearances. "You can call me Walls," the pale wizard said, nodding to Aberforth and the older man, then casually took a seat. "A brandy, preferably with some dragon's blood." "No," Aberforth said quietly. "We don't have dragon's blood." "No dragon's blood, then. And no brandy, only butterbeer or fire whiskey," Walls replied, as if it didn't matter whether he drank at all. "Then fire whiskey. It's raining. I need to warm up." He stretched back in his chair and produced the last 2 days' copies of the Daily Prophet from his pocket. He pretended to read, though his eyes kept flicking between Aberforth and the old man, clearly trying to start a conversation. The old man had glanced at him when he came in, then returned to his paper. Walls waited until Aberforth approached with the drink before putting the Prophet down and addressing the grimy barkeeper in a familiar tone. "Have you heard anything? Any leads on Sirius Black or Tom Riddle?" "No," Aberforth replied, bluntly uninterested. Walls wasn't ready to let it drop. He flicked the paper. The sound snapped in the quiet bar. "I heard Tom Riddle might have shown up here." "Maybe," Aberforth said. "The Ministry says he might have been in Hogsmeade, but I haven't seen him." "The Ministry's useless," the old man muttered, overhearing them. "Goblins and dark wizards conspiring, clearly planning another uprising. Yet they negotiate with goblins. Do they think those greedy, cunning creatures will mourn goblins dead as their own? We quashed a rebellion centuries ago and ended up seating Gringotts. They might as well hand over the Ministry next." He scoffed and returned to his paper. Walls let the conversation on politics slide. He cared about only 2 things: Tom Riddle's whereabouts and ancient magic. He glanced back at the Prophet. The headlines made Tom Riddle's actions after escaping Azkaban far more notorious than anything about Sirius Black. People did not attack the Ministry for no reason. They wanted something. Given the Highlands incident, ancient magic was the obvious aim. That power had almost killed him. Walls lowered his head, his features twisted, and for a moment another face flashed across his own, vertical, jaundiced pupils like a cold-blooded animal. Lord Voldemort. He had left Albania once before. Now he had come back to Britain to find another him. He burned to know how the soul fragment in the diary Horcrux had been resurrected. When he'd made Horcruxes, he hadn't imagined such a thing. A piece of soul reawakened and asserting itself. Horcruxes were meant to bind him to immortality, not spawn another will. The thought of an existence beyond his control was intolerable. So he had risked leaving Albania again to see whether that reawakened fragment truly was himself. If it was, and it would submit, they could unite against Dumbledore, rule Britain, conquer Europe, perhaps the world. All muggles and wizards would bow before them. The world was vast. Voldemort would gladly cede a small corner for another version of himself to rule alongside him. But if that fragment would not submit, he would never tolerate an independent existence. In fact, he already suspected something. If the soul reborn from the diary intended to bow to him, it would have sought him in Albania to bring him back. A crimson killing intent flashed in his eyes. He sat a while longer, not lingering too long. He let himself seem merely a wizard interested in ancient magic, then slipped Aberforth some money to keep an ear out for Tom Riddle or any news of ancient magic before he left. The body he now occupied was frail and drained, constantly needing replenishment. That was why he'd asked for dragon's blood as soon as he came in. Unlike with Quirrell, when he had slept and allowed Quirrell to do most of the moving, this time Voldemort intended to act himself. He planned to go to Nocturne Alley to obtain something to restore his vitality. Unicorn blood would be best, but was too rare. Dragon's blood could also sustain him. He pushed open the door into the rain. The sky was dark. He glanced up, and with a soft pop he vanished. Not far off, a golden-winged eagle flew in over the horizon. Cyrus cut through the rain, oblivious to how close he'd passed Voldemort. He cast damp and fireproofing charms upon himself, and, using the dim weather and the sound of the storm for cover, folded his wings and slipped under the hogshead eaves. His golden pupils flashed in the wet night as he regarded the bloody, terrifying pig's head that hung above the bar. Years of sun and rain hadn't rotted or shriveled it. It was enchanted, or perhaps the head of some magical pig. The hog's head had a long history, centuries old at least, but the head looked disturbingly fresh. Cyrus felt a little sick, but inspected it carefully. At last he found something odd in the pig's teeth. He hooked it out with a claw, and a golden key dropped into his talon. The key's tip spiraled, half smoke and half flame, the mark of ancient magic. He felt a flush of astonishment. He had lived by the hogshead for a time, walking past that grisly head morning and night, never imagining the key he'd searched for lay right inside it. Now it was time to go to Gringotts. Thanks to Mysterious Bandaged Man for the 500-point reward, and to Buddhist Red Dust, Musician 7, and Strongest Heroic Spirit Astolfo for the 100-point rewards. Thank you, bosses. 130. Gringotts. Before heading to Gringotts, Cyrus had a few errands to run. He changed his face, slipped into a shop, and spent some galleons on a trunk. Like most wizarding trunks, it was enchanted with an undetectable extension charm and was deceptively large inside. That said, in Cyrus's opinion, it still wasn't large enough. He wanted room for wilderness and mountains, even sunrises and sunsets, anything that would let him keep the dragon he'd acquired earlier. For now, the dragon lived in a mountain range. Cyrus sighed. Enlarging the trunk himself would be no great technical feat, only a tedious one. He put the thought aside. There were more pressing matters. He stopped at the Leaky Cauldron, found the old wizard Tom, rented a room, stowed the trunk, and ate. Then he passed back through the wall into Diagon Alley and walked toward Gringotts. Gringotts dominated the alley. Goblins liked to show their wealth, and the bank made no exception. Taller than any other building, its white exterior looked carved from marble. Its great bronze doors gleamed in the sun. Even the attendants dressed as if for a parade. The short goblin at the entrance wore a scarlet uniform trimmed in gold and bowed as Cyrus approached without offering any welcome. Inside, the floor was a white gold so flawless it might have been mutton-fat jade. Beyond the bronze doors hung a second set of silver doors, engraved with warnings Cyrus already knew by heart. He was not here for ceremony. He was here for something that did not belong to him, though technically he possessed the key to Vault 12. A huge marble hall opened after the silver doors. Nearly 100 goblins in suits and ties perched on high stools, their height allowing them to look down on any wizard who entered. Their attitude struck Cyrus as ridiculous. The goblins had been beaten in the long struggle with wizards, yet they lavished themselves with riches and a haughty air, as if that could redeem them. Their greed, despised though it was, had made them prosperous, and in some ways it gave them a sense of superiority. Cyrus thought of other non-human races, centaurs, giants, who were far more powerful, but in many ways worse off. To win rights requires relentless struggle. For that reason, he almost respected the goblin's tenacity. Still, as a human and a wizard, his sympathies lay elsewhere. "Welcome, sir," an attendant began, bowing halfway. "I need Vault 12, Cyrus said. The whole room froze. Quills stopped. A goblin pausing with a gem on the scales let it roll. A pigeon egg-sized ruby rolled to Cyrus's feet before hands darted to stop it. Conversation resumed cautiously. "The key, sir." Cyrus handed over the key. An aged goblin with a monocle, seated at the center of the hall, examined it carefully. At last he spoke. "The key is genuine. Lahuan, take him." A familiar goblin stepped forward. He had a high forehead, gray hair, and reached barely to Cyrus's waist. "This way, sir." Lahuan led him to one of many white gold doors. They all looked almost identical. Sensing Cyrus's puzzled glance, Lahuan explained, "Different doors lead to different underground routes. The actual space is the same, but the tracks vary. Ancient vaults like Vault 12 are up front." The door they used was set very far forward. Several goblins slipped away hurriedly, glancing at Cyrus as they left. Lahuan opened the door, and Cyrus stepped into something that could not have been more unlike the opulence above, a dark, damp cavern. Black tracks wound around the rock walls like giant snakes and disappeared into branching tunnels. "Get in!" Lahuan gestured to a trolley waiting on the rails. It looked like a battered miner's cart with a single long handrail for a strap of security. Gringotts charged a management fee for opening vaults and spent the money on dragons and other protections. The customer's comfort was an afterthought. Lahuan pulled the lever and the trolley lurched forward. It was terrifyingly fast. The iron wheels threw sparks against the rails. The roar of the cart made Cyrus feel like he was on a roller coaster. He had the impression they must have traveled for kilometers. Perhaps they'd hollowed out all beneath London, or perhaps the tunnels themselves were enchanted with extension charms. Then a sudden splash of icy water hit his face. Cyrus ducked and covered his face with his hands. Under the deluge, he felt the artificial features he had been wearing slide away, his appearance reverting to his original, handsome face. The cave was dim, and Lahuan's attention was fixed ahead. The goblin didn't seem to notice. "Apologies, sir. That's the thief's downfall," Lahuan said with an almost pleased tone. "One of Gringotts' security measures. It washes away magical power." Cyrus wiped water from his face with a sleeve and asked, "Can it wash away any magic?" Lahuan shivered and answered gloomily, "No, sir. Not everything. It's mainly meant to counter transfiguration, confundo, and imperio, so we aren't controlled by ill-intentioned wizards." He glanced over his shoulder as if worried Cyrus might try something foolish. Cyrus had already reverted to his original face, so there was nothing for the goblin to see. They rode on. Lahuan stopped once to report to a guard at the approach to the ancient vaults, then pulled away again. After an interval of clanking tracks and comet-like sparks, Lahuan braked. The trolley screamed as the wheels fought the friction and then came to a halt. Lahuan jumped down onto a metal platform. Before Cyrus stood an ancient door. It was a bronze door, warded with magic. If one tried to force it open, it would take a very powerful spell, and there would be a real risk of the cavern collapsing. Lahuan used a key, turned the lock, closed the door behind them, then slipped the key back into his pocket and gestured for Cyrus to enter. Cyrus stepped inside. The vault was empty. "There's really nothing?" he muttered. He knew this small vault was only a cover, but he had expected at least some lesser treasures left behind by the 4 ancient magic guardians. Then he noticed the blackened streaks on the floor and walls. Even after more than a century, Cyrus recognized the stains as blood. Lanloke had been here. Lanloke's manuscripts described using living human blood to trace ancient magic marks. In a world without the original protagonist from Legacy, Lanloke had still managed to get into the vault. But Cyrus also knew the Guardians wouldn't hand over ancient magic willingly. "Sir, I'll wait outside," Lahuan said, ready to retreat. "Why bother, Mr. Lahuan?" Cyrus replied without turning, his gaze fixed on the blackened wall. He drew his wand. There was no need for disguise any longer. He shed it and returned to his true appearance. Lahuan's pupils tightened. "You are Tom Riddle?" he breathed. Cyrus smiled faintly. "I'll give you one chance." He traced an arc in the air with his wand. Iridescent blue mist unfurled and spread like fog. Lahuan tried to step back instinctively, but the light didn't harm him. Instead, under that magic, the blackened wall vanished, revealing a vast darkness beyond. Lahuan's eyes widened. He had not expected another chamber hidden behind the secret room. Cyrus stepped forward into the void. "This is," Lahuan whispered. "An arena," Cyrus said. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking down at the small, stiff-shouldered man. His eyes burned with heat, but there was an icy quality to them. The immense black space behind Cyrus did not itself hold ancient magic. Reaching the 4 founders still required passing certain trials. Cyrus had no intention of making it difficult. He intended to handle the trials and the goblins at once. Lahuan stood frozen, stunned, and afraid of Cyrus, too frightened to move as Cyrus walked into the dark. The chamber was vast. He couldn't make out a ceiling, only circular stone pillars thicker than a person, as if they supported the entire floor above. Cyrus moved through the darkness until a pale white light rose from the ground like mist driven by wind. He reached the center of the light and whispered a spell. "Revelio." The light expanded, but the cavern did not grow any brighter. The only thing that changed was the surface beneath Cyrus's feet. Gray dirt became a frozen, black ice. Beneath that ice lay row upon row of kneeling knight statues, dozens, not the few found in the game, an entire army slumbering under the surface. Cyrus stood in the center of the chamber, contemptuous as he looked at the short, stranded Lahuan, then closed his eyes and rested, paying the man no heed. Lahuan's nerves were on edge. Cyrus had caused major incidents before. Not long ago on the Scottish coast, he had slain a dragon single-handedly. Dragons weren't beaten by brute force. They required trained tamers and clever tactics, and even the Ministry's best aurors had trouble breaking a dragon's hide. For someone of that power, killing a single wizard would be effortless. But Lahuan still clung to hope. Cyrus's arrogance was a flaw. He hadn't seen the change under Cyrus's feet, nor the ranks of stone knights beneath the ice. Lahuan assumed Cyrus planned to face all the goblins alone, a reckless, suicidal move. Even weak goblin forces were dangerous. In the last 100 years, the goblins had forged many magical artifacts. A fully armed goblin host could force the Ministry of Magic to send every auror they had. If Cyrus fought them alone, Lahuan thought he would die. A cruel smile crept across Lahuan's face. Once Boderick and his goblin army arrived, Tom Riddle would certainly be killed. From outside the vault, a distant rumble began, iron wheels scraping on metal tracks. Lahuan's heart leapt. Reinforcements. Boderick had come. He was bold enough to lead the charge himself, armored and imposing, short but menacing. With a ghostly face, he could be terrifying when he wanted to be. Cyrus opened his eyes just as the first goblins poured through the doorway. Their skin was yellow-green. To Cyrus, they swarmed like a pack of greedy locusts. Lahuan slunk back behind Boderick, whispering hurriedly. Carts clattered in the tunnel, goblins, one after another, pressing into the vault. "So you are Tom Riddle," Boderick declared as he strode forward. His tone was scornful and triumphant. "You killed my brothers Dokuro and Adora." Cyrus frowned. "Call me Cyrus, Mr. Goblin. I don't like that name." "I don't care what you call yourself," Boderick sneered. "You'll die here. Shall I carve your headstone now?" He jerked his chin toward the waiting throng. "Attack!" Boderick's arms were absurdly long, nearly 2/3 the length of his body. Despite his short stature, his hands were larger than an average man's. As his broad palms swung down, the goblins behind him roared and charged, weapons raised. They poured through the narrow bronze door and into the gap in the wall, swarming like insects into the vast, dark chamber beyond. Boderick had almost written Cyrus off as dead. Now he prowled the cavern with a satisfied air. "Vault 12 actually hides a secret chamber," he muttered. "Landloke's records were right. Perfect. I'll use this wizard's blood to find the power of ancient magic." His face was cold with cruelty. To him, a wizard's life meant nothing. He felt no guilt killing goblins either. If anything, they were worse. Cunning, greedy, merciless little beasts. Ugly, small fiends with red eyes that gleamed like hungry coals as they surged forward, eager to tear Cyrus apart, to drink his blood and chew his flesh. Most of the goblins wore light armor laced with minor magic resistance and carried silver weapons. A few wielded wands, hurling crude spells. "Are all the actors here? Then let the show begin." Cyrus traced a sweeping R in the air with his wand, speaking apparition while blocking incoming magic. Rumble. Beneath the ice, the knights that had lain frozen suddenly appeared in the chamber, like reflections stepping out of shadow. They were solemn, dignified, ancient, warriors carved from stone and history. The goblins never expected them. The statues materialized directly in their path, and many tripped, rolling like puppets gone wrong. "What's this? Where did these stone statues come from?" Boderick's eyes widened. "Landloke's manuscript didn't mention this?" Cyrus laughed softly. He had read Landloke's notes. They recorded nothing of what happened after Landloke entered the hidden chamber. After that, Landloke had vanished, along with his secrets and goblin artifacts, a fact that had earned him the goblins' hatred. Cyrus leveled a brighter spell at the ceiling, a strengthened lumos, the ultimate lumos. A white globe of light blossomed, hanging like a cold winter sun and flooding the cavern with brilliant, blinding clarity. The goblins' eyes stung. They blinked, stunned. In the harsh light, the stone knight's armor and the shadows beneath the ice began to line up. Crack, crack! Joints shifted and stone dust fluttered as the statues came to life. Cyrus sheathed his wand and, with a slight curl of his lips, raised both hands as if conducting an orchestra. "At a time like this, shouldn't I say," he drawled, then called aloud, "Stone golems, advance." The stone knights drew longswords. They were guardians, unyielding, efficient, devoid of mercy. Anyone who trespassed in this chamber was their target. Cyrus, who had deliberately kept his distance, turned a knight's stone axe, aimed at him from behind, into a bouquet of flowers without looking back. Then he slipped into a wisp of black smoke and shot upward toward the domed ceiling, vanishing into the dark. He left the battlefield to the goblins and the statues. But Derek, convinced the statues were Cyrus's doing, ground his teeth. "No wonder that despicable wizard dared challenge us," he bellowed, sending his troops after the golems. "Smash them all!" The chamber erupted in the clash of metal on stone. Goblins swung hammers at the knights' legs while stone swords punctured goblin bellies, lifting and slamming them. Axes severed heads, blades ripped open chests, and heavy boots crushed skulls. Blood slicked the uneven ice. The slaughter was terrible, and slowly the tide of battle turned. Boderic's bravado faltered. Fear threaded his limbs, but he refused to give up. "Calm down, brothers," he snarled to himself. "These are necessary sacrifices. We goblins must pay in blood to reclaim our rights. Ancient magic is worth it." "Hold on, brothers," he shouted, though he dodged more than fought. "We have numbers." Then a scream of panic rose. "But Lord Boderick, they self-repair." A goblin staggered back, eyes wide with terror. Boderick watched as knights with shattered legs rose again. Scattered rubble and severed limbs knit themselves back into place as if time itself reversed. The stone warriors reformed relentlessly. Goblins could not resurrect. "Cursed wizard, using tricks! Find him! Kill the wizard! If we kill the wizard, the magic will break." Boderick was sure that killing Cyrus would stop the statues, so he searched the roof and the rafters for any sign of the black smoke. But Cyrus had already flown into the air during the initial chaos and was currently between solid and smoke, perched somewhere in the dark dome. The flying spell, stolen from Lord Voldemort, as ugly and murky as its name suggested, hid him well. With the goblin numbers falling, Boderick felt trapped by a nightmare that refused to be a dream. So many had surrounded one wizard. He should have won, claimed the ancient magic, and been hailed a hero. Instead, the chamber filled with the sound of goblin wails and the wet patter of blood on ice. "It can't end like this. This must be a dream," he muttered, trying to force himself into denial. Then something struck him hard on the head. Pain exploded across his skull, dragging him back to reality. He opened his eyes to a jagged, ugly goblin head rolling to a stop at his feet. It sat upright, eyes wide and bulging from the impact, the pupils staring as if fixed in furious surprise. Blood ran from its mouth, which hung open in a silent scream, the expression frozen between rage and disbelief. 133. Secrets in the Pensieve. Boderick's head was full of panic, not of fantasies about goblins ruling over wizarding women or enslaving wizards after victory. He could not hold a scrap of ancient magic now. He only wanted out of this hell. He fled blindly toward the vault entrance. In his haste, he stepped on an arm and stumbled, then went down to all fours, a goblin's awkward crawl, hands and feet scrabbling like a mangy dog with its tail between its legs. He worried he was too slow and fumbled to undo his heavy armor as he crawled. The goblins behind him were still fighting. He dared not cry out. If they discovered he had become a fleeing rat, they would abandon the battle and rend him apart. He knew goblin cruelty better than anyone. In that sorry state, he finally reached the narrow bronze door. A tragic smile split his face as his hand reached for it, the narrow gate of salvation. He could almost see an invisible light beyond it. If he could only get through, he would be saved. His fingertips brushed the metal and the door snapped shut. The smile on his face hadn't had time to fade. He froze and looked up at the handsome wizard smiling down at him. From inside the door came the soft whir of machinery, a small sound in the cacophony, but sharp to his ears. "Where are you going, Mr. Goblin?" Cyrus asked coldly. The light in Boderick's heart went out. "Sir, please." He dropped to his knees without hesitation, misery on his face, and reached for Cyrus's robes. Cyrus stepped back. He would not have insects crawling on him. "Good night, sir." Cyrus flicked his wand. Boderick's head twisted, involuntarily. There was a sickening crack. His neck shattered into powder. Cyrus felt no sympathy. This was a war between races, not the death of an innocent. His golden pupils swept the battlefield inside the secret vault. The goblins had been driven bloody. The repair magic in the knight's constructs had burned through its reserves with every triggered effect. The remaining goblins were less than a tenth of their number, their ferocity spent. Worse, some had noticed their leader had vanished, and the rest began to falter and retreat, even though the knights were badly damaged. Many of the knights still shuffled under the curse's effect. Shattered pieces would reknit. The construct would lurch forward a few steps, then collapse again with a crash, tumbling apart like a wall that had lost a keystone. At last, the fighting stopped. Light flickered and then dimmed. Darkness settled again. Cyrus would be the one to light it. Fiend fire. He held the flame in his palm. The unruly fire lay there like a tamed cat. When he tipped his hand, it flowed down like lava, revealing its true, terrible nature. Silent roars seemed to come from the monsters coiled within the flame. Under fiend fire, nothing, neither knight nor goblin, escaped being burned to ash. Where indistinguishable remains had been, nothing was left. Where goblins writhed in the blaze as if tearing at their own skin, the fire consumed every scrap. Cyrus stepped over the searing path, following the scorched trail it left. It led into the depths of the darkness, a single ribbon toward the real secret vault. On either side rose countless identical white pillars, so uniform they made the head spin. He glanced back. The battle was swallowed by shadow. The landscape repeated endlessly, without a sense for ancient magic. Even a victorious intruder would be lost here. To Cyrus, it was simply a maze with a marked path. He walked until he reached a huge three-dimensional spiral symbol. He tapped it with his wand. It flowed like mercury into the floor, then surged up again, resolving into a door. Beyond it lay the true secret vault. Cyrus entered a vast circular hall, its ceiling high and walls carved with ornate patterns so intricate the place felt more like a chapel than a repository. The architecture was old and sumptuous. Even a scrap might be enough to set the Weasleys up for a move to Africa. But it was not material wealth that drew Cyrus's attention. He stepped onto a floor that seemed as solid as a frozen water surface. At the hall's center, where magic pooled, was something that looked like a basin, a pensieve. Memories shimmered above it, the recollections of the four guardians floating silently. Ordinarily, a levitation charm would have been enough. Even the clumsiest witch could have done that. The real issue was that the four guardians had been dead for centuries. When a spellcaster dies, so often does the source of their magic. Voldemort's curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts position vanished once he was gone. When the Potters died, the Fidelius ceased to function. Without a living source, spells fade. There were exceptions. Hogwarts was the prime example. The ancient castle had stood for 1,000 years while its founders had long since passed, yet its magic endured. Either the castle itself was a work of ancient magic, or it possessed a vast reserve, or both. Cyrus didn't know which. He knew only that the secret of ancient magic sat before him now, and this time nothing would interrupt him. The Guardians went to such lengths, set up so many trials, surely not to guard a worthless memory, he murmured. He plucked an exquisite vial floating above the pensieve and poured a thread of silvery, mercury-like liquid into the basin. The surface immediately spun into a vortex. Let me see your secret. 134. Voldemort on the move. Show me your secrets. In the shadowed alleys behind Diagon Alley, a young wizard shoved his wand into a goblin's mind, prying it open with cruel force. Lord Voldemort had come to Knockturn Alley first. It was the haunt of the darkest practitioners in Britain, crowded close to Diagon Alley, yet worlds apart. Diagon Alley bustled and glittered. Knockturn Alley was filthy and smelled of rot. The wizards who drifted there were often little better than scavengers, fighting over the scraps of magic the respectable would not touch. That said, not everyone who made a living there was low-born filth. Some had entrenched themselves so thoroughly that they commanded a reluctant respect. Borgin and Burke's was a good example. Its owner, Caractacus Burke, one of the Sacred 28, looked perpetually disheveled, but even a Malfoy would address him as Mr. In times when the Ministry watched dark artifacts closely, Burke still dealt in forbidden items. Tom Riddle had once apprenticed there, selecting objects he thought worthy of becoming Horcruxes. But Voldemort was not hunting trinkets today. He needed dragon blood, or better yet, unicorn blood, to keep his ruinous body alive a little longer. There were many apothecaries in Knockturn Alley, but the most famous of them belonged to the Traverse family. The Traverses, another of the Sacred 28, were like bedrock in a turbulent current. The proprietress now, an old, stooped witch with age spots and drooping eyelids that hid almost all her pupils, seemed to exude the aura of death itself. 50 years ago, the Travers Voldemort remembered had looked much the same. He did not find that strange. In the magical world, longevity came in many forms. Few lived 600 years like Nicholas Flamel, but wizards of 200 years were not unheard of. Snape's boast in potions class that the subject could make one refuse death had some basis. Voldemort despised mere longevity for its own sake. Aging was still a form of death to him. He wanted not just to live, but to hold power eternally. "What can I get you?" the old Mrs. Travers asked slowly, as if she might collapse at any moment. Her movements were shaky. "Polyjuice? Felix Felicis? I have other forbidden potions too, but they'll cost." "1 ounce of dragon blood," Voldemort said, his voice hoarse. Dragon blood? Her eyelids lifted a fraction, surprise creasing the wrinkles of her face. She had not expected someone to come all this way for raw ingredients. She examined him with a peculiar interest. "What's your last name, child?" "Walls," Riddle said casually. "Walls?" Travers thought, searching her memory but drawing a blank. Whatever the name meant, he was a customer, and that was enough. "Only dragon blood?" "If you have it, unicorn blood would be preferable," Voldemort replied. Travers' surprise deepened. Her cloudy eyes came into view. "Unicorn blood? You don't mean to drink that, do you?" "You speak as if you have some." Voldemort's eyes brightened. "I didn't originally, but it came into my hands not long ago," Mrs. Travers chuckled, the sound bitter. "A smuggled foal. Beautiful creature, but it could not be saved. I drained its blood and skinned it." She produced a large bottle of silver-red fluid. "See how it shines. But know this, the blood of a unicorn that died in hate carries a curse. It will twist a person into something half-dead. I plan to use it for poisons, but, if you're willing, it's 258 galleons." The warning was a courtesy. Travers didn't care what the purchaser intended. Voldemort cared even less. Galleons were not his to fritter, and a curse that turned men half-dead was nothing to one who already stood beyond death. He would not drink it in front of a stranger. Unicorn blood was agonizing to take, but he would find a place to do it alone. He did not even trust his own followers. With the bottle secured, Voldemort left Knockturn Alley and immediately sensed something amiss. Goblins at the entrance to Gringotts were tense. The bank's guards had been doubled, their lines reinforced as if to bar entry. Gringotts had heightened security after the attack 2 years prior, but Voldemort had never seen it shut to outsiders like this. Wizards trying to enter were being turned away. Some goblins slipped away from the crowd and vanished into shadowed corners. Something major had happened inside the bank. He connected it to the recent conflict in the Scottish Highlands without much effort. Ancient magic. The person he had been searching for, whose name had hovered at the edge of his ambitions, must be here. Voldemort's pupils narrowed into hungry slits. Desire and murderous intent filled him, not merely to strike and kill, but to devour his opponent entirely, to swallow up whatever power stood before him. In his memory, the room was still as exquisite and magnificent as he remembered, only shrouded now in a thin gray veil. 2 wizards in older robes moved through it, layering spells that filled in the chamber's details. Delicate spires rose like spirals. They seemed almost godlike. One of the wizards was short and stout, an ancestor of Luke Wood, and the other was thin and tall, Percival Rackham. Cyrus had never heard that surname before, but the name Percival echoed Dumbledore's own, and of course Percival was also the name of one of King Arthur's knights. In Cyrus's memory, Luke Wood fretted about the complexity and number of the wards Percival was creating, but Percival kept working, sealing spell after spell and preserving his memories in a bottle. Cyrus watched them cast their charms and listened. To him, the spells were traceable. He just hadn't yet understood what gave ancient magic its edge. For the same level of transfiguration, ordinary magic seemed to achieve similar results. He was puzzling over that when a voice came from behind him. "The key is greater power and longer preservation," the voice said. Cyrus spun around. The two wizards from the Pensieve's memory were speaking to him now, as if their images had been given minds. "And it must be more mysterious," Percival added. They were no longer just simple recollections. They had become something like the animate state of a portrait. Cyrus felt his guard go up. Who knew what kind of world this was? Perhaps these guardians were not benevolent. Percival must have seen his wariness. "Don't worry, we're only a segment of thought," he said, "like a portrait." Cyrus wasn't reassured. He regretted using the pensieve instead of viewing the memory through his own ability. That would have left him more room to maneuver. Still, Percival and Luke Wood did nothing odd. They continued to explain. "Ancient magic wields forces ordinary wizards cannot touch," Percival said, modestly, and it was modesty in the wrong direction. Those with the gift of ancient magic regarded ordinary wizards much as wizards regarded muggles. Ordinary wizards couldn't even perceive ancient magic, let alone dismantle it. The difference was vast. It was like a muggle trying to build an ornate castle by hand, while a wizard could create one with a flick of a wand. Everything ordinary magic could do, ancient magic could do better, and it could do things ordinary magic could not. "You didn't come to all this trouble just to preserve a memory?" Cyrus asked. Vault 12, in the story of the Legacy, was full of trials. The memories inside mostly proved ancient magic existed. He had expected more. "Of course not," Luke said. "Ancient magic is dangerous. It needs to be guarded closely. We must determine whether, besides your abilities, your heart can serve as a guardian." When they spoke of qualifications, both Percival and Luke Wood showed an emotion Cyrus could not name, regret, perhaps, as if they had once made a mistake. Cyrus wasn't overly worried. He wasn't the sort of person who would squander power or act recklessly. "And such guardianship is necessary," Percival added. "Over 100 years ago, a goblin tried to seize the power of ancient magic. He reached this vault, but returned empty-handed." "Lanloke? What happened to him?" Cyrus asked. "Unclear," Percival admitted. "Perhaps he perished beneath the Guardian's great sword. Our consciousness exists only in the pensieve, so we don't always know what became of others. What we do know is this. If ancient magic falls into the hands of goblins or those with ill intent, the wizarding world would face catastrophe." Cyrus agreed. But if that was all, his trip to Vault 12 felt like a letdown. He already knew ancient magic existed. This memory merely confirmed it. Seeing his thoughts, the two guardians exchanged a smile and went on. "You must be wondering why we went to such lengths and didn't just lock ancient magic in the vault," Luke said. "Because ancient magic flows within the magic of your body." "It flows inside me?" Cyrus asked. "Of course, young wizards don't acquire magic at Hogwarts. They have it already. Hogwarts teaches them to use it. Ancient magic is the same. You were eligible to attend because you possess it. That is why you stand here." "But how do I tap it?" "By feeling the difference," Percival said, almost rapt. "Sense the two distinct kinds of magic within you. Once you can tell them apart, you'll find that even the most ordinary spell grows in strength. Think of the Revelio you cast. Why could it penetrate the wards of ancient magic? Because you channeled two kinds of magic. Now you must learn to recognize the differences and transform the first type into ancient magic." Cyrus closed his eyes and tried to feel, but it wasn't easy. "It's not that simple, is it?" he said. "No," Luke agreed. "That's why we left trials to guide you. How to properly use ancient magic will reveal itself as you complete them." "Trials?" Cyrus echoed. "The four of us who guard ancient magic set 4 trials in total," Percival explained. "You'll need a book to help you find and complete them. It's in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts." Cyrus only half understood the plot of the Legacy and had never heard of that room. "The Room of Requirement?" "It's at Hogwarts. You'll find it," Percival said. The memory ended. "Thanks to Fragrant Rice for the 100 points of reward." "Thank you, boss." 136, the person who cannot even be mentioned by name. The memory ended abruptly, leaving Cyrus no time to react. The world snapped back into color, and the pensieve, the shallow silver basin, seemed to sink into the floor as if the ground were water, swallowing it whole. He didn't leave right away. He stood where he was, trying to make sense of the strange magic Percival had described. Mastering ancient magic carried advantages beyond raw power. For most wizards, ancient magic was effectively invisible. Spells woven with it were difficult to break, and common countercharms often failed. Apparition, for instance, could be restricted by anti-apparition wards and usually left traces that let others infer a disapparition point. Ancient magic, Percival had implied, might bypass those traces entirely. But as Percival had also said, perceiving and using the magic in one's own body was no simple matter. It required learning to look inward. "Let's see what that book in the Room of Requirement can teach me," Cyrus murmured, and then his expression tightened. The Room of Requirement was in Hogwarts. He had only just escaped from the castle, and he would have to go back. Getting back wouldn't be the problem. It was doing so without being discovered that worried him. Dumbledore's informants and the Marauder's map were obstacles. There had to be a way to hide oneself on the map. No one had ever done it. Dumbledore had no reason to, and Voldemort didn't even know the map existed. Cyrus had studied how the Marauder's map worked. It was older than the 4 Marauders' mischiefs teased in stories, something they had modified and finished from earlier magic. The map's core was still Hominum Revelio and binding contracts. Hominum Revelio was straightforward enough, but contracts were another matter. Contract magic in the wizarding world carried enormous force. Even a normal Fidelius charm was almost impossible to break. Dumbledore had resorted to elaborate schemes to circumvent a blood pact and had only succeeded through a loophole. If he could get the map, he didn't know whether it was back with the twins or had been confiscated by Dumbledore, but from the headmaster's tone, he'd had a feeling it would be returned. He remembered Sirius sneaking into the castle during Harry's Quidditch match, and Halloween was always an opportunity. On nights like those, George and Fred rarely took the map out. Once they'd learned the secret passages, they preferred wandering the castle and playing cat and mouse with Filch. That made certain nights more promising for getting hold of it without attracting attention. He was still thinking when the vault door made a sound that didn't belong in silence. Cyrus turned. The door was a tall, heavy slab of hammered gold, nearly 4 or 5 meters high, its top reaching all the way to the dome above. It wasn't the narrow door he had passed through after the black space. Now, having passed the first test, the vault had revealed its true form. A massive, ancient entrance leading straight into Gringotts underground. Someone on the other side had opened it. If nothing unexpected had happened, it should have been goblin reinforcements. Cyrus gripped his wand and readied himself. Boom! The vault shook. The floor beneath his feet rippled like water. Dust sifted down from the dome. A tremendous explosion blew the door inward. Tons of gold shattered and hurtled through the air like boulders. Fragments the size of men cast shadows over him. Cyrus didn't flinch. He planted his feet and raised his wand. Bombarda! The largest pieces of the door disintegrated under the blast, flying apart into a spray of stone and metal. Thick smoke and choking dust billowed through the vault. Then a colossal, misshapen head appeared out of the haze, jaws dripping, fangs bared, and it spat fire. The flames engulfed the chamber in an instant. A dragon, ancient and immense, filled the vault. Its scales were pale and slack, like the hair of an old man, its eyes clouded, yet the heat of its breath was terrible. The beast tore through goblins as it came in. Claws impaled bodies, fangs crushed armor and bone. Still living goblins hung from its bat-like wings, staining them red. The dragon's fire roared on, relentless, like fiend fire, without relent. From the wall of flames, a young wizard stepped forward, wand in hand and expression insolent, as if he were appraising a nuisance rather than a monster. If I'd known Gringotts kept dragons, I wouldn't have wasted my time buying dragon blood in Nocturne Alley, he said, with a cold amusement. Lord Voldemort. Cyrus remembered the reports of Voldemort's attack on Gringotts 2 years before. Vault 713 had been far from any dragon. Neither Voldemort's forces nor the goblins had known there was a dragon that could be unleashed like this. The beast thrashed inside the confined space, flame licking the walls, its wounded body howling with pain. Quiet, beast, Voldemort said, flicking his wand. From the tip sprang a black, thorny iron chain that lashed out and wrapped around the dragon. The creature cried out, a sound that should have sent it into a fresh frenzy, But when it faced Voldemort, it lowered its head and whimpered, cowed. Voldemort's smile was not triumphant. It was an arrogance that reached bone deep. He ignored the subdued dragon and stared through the smoke. "Come out, Tom Riddle, or rather, Cyrus." Gringotts had exploded, but the destruction had been planned and executed by Lord Voldemort. Chapter 137, Cyrus. Only losers are called the Dark Lord. "Come out, Tom Riddle, or as you call yourself now, Cyrus." Lord Voldemort's voice was hoarse and low, but it carried into every corner of the vault, as if he were whispering into the stone. The flames showed no other movement, which irritated him slightly. Anger, however, was for his lesser servants and mudbloods. For someone who might be a fragment of himself, he felt a strange patience. He steepled his fingers and leaned against the vault's opening, a look of something like expectation on his face, as if meeting an old acquaintance after a long absence. Tom Riddle is the one who terrorized Hogwarts this year. He opened the legendary Chamber of Secrets. Voldemort recited softly from a newspaper article. When I read that, do you know how surprised I was? I was in the dark jungles of Albania, eking out an existence inside worthless snakes and rats. And yet someone else, bearing my name, was making a spectacle at Hogwarts. He paused, voice curling with curiosity. "I'm very curious. Who exactly are you?" The young wizard's features shifted into something snake-like and pale, though unlike Voldemort's most familiar visage, he still had a nose. "Come on, let me see you. Don't be shy." His tone was almost indulgent, a professor humoring a wayward student. Then the vault's flames changed. The dragon-red fire cooled to an eerie blue and flowed like a wind-swept field of bluebells, parting to reveal a flat patch of floor where Cyrus stood, looking through the blaze with a cold expression. Voldemort was momentarily stunned. He'd almost forgotten how handsome he had once been. After a long moment, he said slowly, "I must say, a hint of gold in your hair suits you. If I'd tried that back then, it would have been easier to get hold of the goblet and the locket." "I'm not here to reminisce," Cyrus replied evenly. He had not expected to find Voldemort here, and he felt no fear. The Dark Lord was clearly not in his prime, occupying a borrowed vessel. Cyrus himself had been recently resurrected and was far from Voldemort's former strength. He hadn't come to die on someone else's whim. Still, he held his exquisite wand in his right hand and kept himself ready for a fight, though outwardly he made a small, elegant flourish as if presenting himself. Right before your eyes, time seemed to stall. For a long moment, both men stood still, as if carved from wood. Tension thrummed between them. Whether it would break into conversation or combat was anyone's guess. Cyrus was wary. He faced a dark wizard of Dumbledore's caliber, but he noticed, too, that Voldemort was cautious. The other man had reservations, perhaps about his current strength, or whether Cyrus still bore features of a Horcrux. Either way, that hesitation was an opportunity. "I didn't expect you to show your face," Cyrus said, taking the initiative. His aim was to unsettle Voldemort. Voldemort bristled. "What do you mean?" "You lost to a child, twice." Cyrus's gaze was cold enough to scald. 12 years ago, you were undone by a 1-year-old infant, an arrogant Dark Lord felled by a baby. How ridiculous. "That's not true," Voldemort snapped. "I was undone by Lily Potter's magic, ancient magic. If not for that, I would not have fallen." "We all thought you dead," Cyrus continued quietly, and when he said we, he meant the Horcruxes. "After that night, I couldn't sense you. I labored to resurrect so our mission could continue. Lucius helped. He was obedient." Voldemort's snakeskin face flickered with something like appreciation. "Lucius, yes, a loyal servant." He shook off the thought of traitors and moved to his pride. "And I am not gone. No one has taken the path to immortality further than I have. My Horcruxes ensure it." He leaned forward, the snake in him glinting with greed. "It's different now, isn't it?" "It is different," Cyrus said. "You are weaker than you were." Voldemort's eyes brightened with a predatory gleam. "But think, if we joined forces, neither of us alone can match Dumbledore. But together, we are the same person. Killing Dumbledore would be nothing, especially with this ancient magic we have discovered." He grew more animated by the second, envisioning conquest. Cyrus cut him off. "We? No, it's me, and only me." The blue flames between them were a clear line. Voldemort's face hardened. A cold, murderous current ran in his gaze. He stared at Cyrus with those vertical pupils for several seconds, then said in a low voice, You dare imagine replacing me? Cyrus could tell that even the faintest attempt would draw a killing blow from Voldemort, but he did not flinch. Replace you? I have no interest in replacing a loser, he said lightly. Besides, many have heard how you slunk to those Albanian marshes after your defeat. Dumbledore knows. It was by my choice to send that out, Voldemort said with a snort. I thought loyal servants would come and resurrect me. Dumbledore came to Albania, Cyrus interrupted. He tried to find and finish you, but he couldn't. But have you ever wondered why he knew about the Philosopher's Stone being able to restore you? Why news of my escape from Azkaban reached you? Who told you? Who provided the vessel you inhabit now? Voldemort's face grew strained. Cyrus pushed the knife in. It was Dumbledore. You're not entirely stupid, Cyrus scoffed. He wanted to test the prophecy concerning you and that child. He wanted to see whether Lily Potter's magic still held power. He wanted to watch how two versions of you would react to each other. That's why you stand before me. The air around Voldemort tightened as the realization pressed upon him. His whole existence, in some sense, had been a thing Dumbledore observed and manipulated. Voldemort hated being a subject of anyone's design. Still, he clung to his Horcruxes as proof against final death. With Cyrus here, perhaps they could truly stand. Cyrus, however, had no faith in any partnership. Even if they joined, Dumbledore could call on help. There was a wizard who had spent half a century imprisoned in Nurmengard, Grindelwald, whose power rivaled Dumbledore's. Between the Elder Wand, the Order of the Phoenix ready to risk everything, and Grindelwald's own adherents, Voldemort's Death Eaters were nothing. Cyrus had no desire to topple Dumbledore. His goal was to claim ancient magic and grow stronger for himself. Come over, Voldemort urged, trying one last time. We are closer to each other than brothers. We were born to wield power. We can be the Dark Lord and strike fear into the world. Cyrus shook his head, contempt clear in his expression. I have no interest in spreading fear. He looked at Voldemort with undisguised disdain. And besides, only losers are called the Dark Lord. Today's 2-1. Also, thank you to Cat Sleeping at Noon for the 1,176 points of reward. Thank you, boss. 38. Battle and Fire. I don't associate with losers. How dare you call me a loser? Lord Voldemort's voice snapped, high and raw like a wounded animal. For a moment he trembled, then mastered himself. I haven't lost. Don't confuse a moment's setback with the end. The one who survives longest is the true victor. I can promise you this, Dumbledore will die before I do. I will be the one to kill him. Cyrus said it with absolute conviction. It wasn't empty bluster. Even at his peak, Voldemort had been slightly inferior to Dumbledore when the Elder Wand was in the latter's hand. That was why he had feared him so much. But even the Elder Wand couldn't utterly extinguish Voldemort. And Voldemort, with Horcruxes, had power that exceeded what most saw. Cyrus had inherited Voldemort's talent and, in many ways, surpassed it. With a foundation to learn ancient magic, he believed his future could rival anyone's. What Cyrus most rejected was being manipulated by Dumbledore. Strength alone wasn't the only danger. Dumbledore's unmatched cunning terrified him. He refused to be a pawn who never even knew how he'd been bested. Voldemort watched him in silence and understood. His expression went cold. It seems our conversation is at an end. Evidently. You're a coward? Voldemort sneered. Afraid of Dumbledore even now, when you stand face to face with me? His snake-like eyes pinned Cyrus, and a chill ran along the younger man's spine. Cyrus felt exposed, every nerve alert. If you won't cooperate, give me the secret of ancient magic. Voldemort stepped through the blue fire. The flames bent around him like grass to wind. He shed the last of his pretense. His face was still grotesquely human, but the expression was that of a python contemplating its meal. Hand it over, Cyrus. Don't try me, Cyrus answered softly. How ancient magic is right in front of you. You simply can't see it, like a muggle who can't sense magic. That touch of contempt provoked Voldemort. He had always loathed the muggle blood in him. It was a private, bitter shame. Cyrus's comparison stung. A furious thought struck Voldemort. Had he made a mistake when he formed that first Horcrux, given it too many memories, too much conscience? Something he could not control was a threat. He had not planned to destroy Cyrus. After all, he did not know if Cyrus, once restored, still counted as a Horcrux. But now the calculus shifted. Ancient magic had bested him 12 years ago. If he could harness even a fragment of that power, killing Dumbledore would be trivial. Losing a Horcrux or two mattered little when he had so many. And Cyrus knew too many of his secrets. If Cyrus refused to join him, he must be made to disappear. The blue flames continued to burn, their light reflected on the water-like floor in patterns like a field of flowers. Cyrus kept his gaze fixed on Voldemort. He hadn't wanted to provoke him, but he would not bow to a Voldemort who hadn't fully resurrected. A diminished Voldemort was a nuisance, not a threat. Voldemort struck without warning. His attack exploded across the vault with a power that made the ground tremble. The spell's radiance vibrated the watery surface beneath them, bending the flames before it arrived. Cyrus's golden pupils narrowed. Time did not slow for him, but his dynamic vision let him perceive every precise motion Voldemort made. He saw the spell before it fully unfolded and reacted. The flames in front of him surged upward as if obeying a hidden command, rising and coalescing into a wall. The dark spell struck the fire and shattered into sparks, strange blue butterflies, only to be dispersed. Voldemort had expected to catch Cyrus off guard. He underestimated him. Cyrus raised his wand, and the surrounding blaze tightened into a dome. Within it, he summoned a demon-horned dragon made of flame that lunged at Voldemort. The dragon's charge met an answer as fierce as fire itself. Voldemort called up Fiendfire, a living blaze more savage than ordinary fire. It took the form of a vast snake and wrapped itself around the dragon. They bit and wrestled, roaring forth heat and light. The real, ancient dragon in the vault crouched in a corner, shivering and unwilling to intervene. Spells flew between the two combatants in a furious, flashing torrent. Even half-formed, Voldemort's magic was formidable. Cyrus's power right then likely exceeded Voldemort's, but Voldemort brought a lifetime of knowledge and experiments to bear. The dark arts he wielded were not merely curses. Many were unfamiliar to Cyrus and more terrifying than the killing curse. Anyone who thought Voldemort was nothing but a one-trick villain failed to understand the breadth of his study. For Cyrus, the fire shield was both spear and bulwark. Most of Voldemort's strikes could not penetrate it. He felt like an artilleryman in a fortress, able to pour out force without constant evasion. Voldemort, however, realized these flames were no mere defense. "Do you think I can't handle you?" he said coldly, flicking his wand. He first cast a shield charm to deflect one assault. Then his body shuddered, and he sent out a volley of spells like lightning. The foremost of them hurtled like a black sun, slicing through the flames and carving a vacuum in the blaze. In that opening, Voldemort's serpent eyes found Cyrus, and a cruel smile spread over his face. Before the flames could close, more spells, dark green and shaped like shadows, burst from the wake of the first, threading through the gaps and missing Cyrus by inches. Then something detonated at the heart of Cyrus's fire. Boom! The supposedly impenetrable dome blew outward from within. A shockwave ripped through the vault, shattering layers of flame. Blue embers and sparks filled the room, lashing against carved beams and painted pillars and tearing cracks into the gilding. Voldemort stood amid the storm, face lit with triumph. "This is my true power," he declared. Blue sparks fluttered about him like malignant butterflies, and the heat of the blast scorched his skin. Where the sparks landed, new tongues of blue fire flared and took hold, the sting of them numbing even the old dragon into fright. Voldemort's smile faltered because in the smoke and blue light he saw a figure still standing in the center of the ruin. Cyrus was unburned. He looked as he had before, only his golden eyes burning brighter. His right hand held his wand at his side, his left reached forward. Electricity crackled across his palm, and he gripped something dark and green, a coiled mote of magic. It was one of the dark spells Voldemort had just cast. 139. Man on the Dragon's Back. Bang! 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 A series of sharp cracks echoed in front of Gringotts' main gate. From a gray vortex, more than a dozen Aurors stepped through, dressed for action and wearing faces gone suddenly serious. Rufus Scrimgeour hurried forward to the goblin in charge of Gringotts. The goblin's expression was like a slab of ancient bluestone, immutable and hard. Scrimgeour's slight limp did not slow him. He moved with decisive efficiency, his black trench coat flaring open. Kingsley and other senior Aurors followed close behind. Moody and Tonks were absent. One had retired, the other had not yet taken up duty. Minister Scrimger, the lead goblin snapped, lunging forward and clamping a huge, gnarled hand to Scrimger's arm. Where is the prisoner who broke into Gringotts? Scrimger didn't bother with pleasantries. Where is he? Still in the cavern. We've got anti-apparition charms down there. He can't get out. Turn him over to us at once, the goblin demanded, his voice high and hard. It was more command than request. Scrimger ignored the tone. His concern was the treasures housed within Gringotts. Half the wizarding world kept vaults here. The more prominent the family, the closer their ties to the bank. If Gringotts were truly breached, the consequences would be catastrophic. Of course, Scrimger said stiffly. He glanced at Kingsley, who immediately understood and led a contingent of aurors to secure the exits. Scrimger then noticed the main gate. The massive copper portcullis had been shattered. A large section had been hurled into Pottage's cauldron shop, collapsing a wall of the ancient shop. You brought so few, the goblin snapped, furious. The ministry has made its arrangements, Scrimger replied coolly, directing the remaining aurors to seal off the bank. If Kingsley's team failed to stop whoever was down there, the aurors stationed at the exits would be the last line of defense. Extend the anti-apparition charm, he ordered, voice clipped. You waste manpower on those two escapees. The ministry is useless. And the matter of Tom Riddle killing 2 goblins is still unresolved, the goblin spat. The minister has already spoken with Boderick of the Goblin Brotherhood through the Goblin Liaison Office, Scrimger said. Gringotts has always been managed by you. Repeated intrusions suggest lax security. If you cannot manage your premises, hand them over. The goblin's face flushed a dark, ugly red, but he said no more. For the ministry to forcibly wrest control of Gringotts would be to invite rebellion. That was a responsibility Scrimger could not bear lightly. He had his aurors prepare, while Kingsley carefully led his team into the bank. Inside, the main hall looked as if it had been bombed. Injured goblins lay where they had fallen, blasted by spells when whoever it was had forced an entry. Protective enchantments had been shredded by whatever power had struck. The goblins stopped being haughty at the sight of the auror's arrival. The intruders in Vault 12, one of them began. Kingsley nodded. He did not need the goblins to point out the path. The trail of destruction was obvious. He was about to lead the aurors down into the cavern when the mountain beneath Gringotts shuddered violently. The floor under their feet trembled, stalactites swayed, and the rock pillars that connected the cavern's roof to its floor creaked like old timber. Kingsley's first thought was a collapse. If the vast cavern fell in, nothing they could do would help. Apparition would be impossible. Spells might not save them. The goblin's impatience cut through his worry. What are you waiting for? One snapped. Kingsley signaled to go, but another, stronger tremor struck. The hall's tiled floor cracked, and someone lost his footing. An auror nearly toppled into the shadowed pit below. Kingsley swore and hauled him back with a quick, precise spell. Then a monstrous roar billowed up from the depths, drawn out and unnervingly distorted by the cavern's shape. The sound was impossible to place at first. What animal? What size? It's the dragon, the injured goblin cried, clenching his fists with a fierce joy. It'll torch that intruder to ash. You aurors are no use. Leave now, or we'll pay you nothing if you stay. The jibe stung the aurors, but they did not answer. Instead, they turned toward the cavern's darkness. Crimson and blue-white flame alternated far below, surging up like a breached flood. Riding through the blaze was a vast, dark shape. Kingsley recognized it at once, a dragon. Britain knew Gringotts kept a dragon beneath the mountain, legal in a manner of speaking, since no law yet forbade goblins from keeping such beasts. He had not expected to see it unchained, and worse, looking panicked. It was not rearing or hurling flames, it seemed to be fleeing. Whatever had broken into the cavern had driven the dragon into a terrified retreat. Yet a dragon remained a dragon, capable of flattening a hall merely by shifting a limb. Stop it, Kingsley barked, raising his wand. He intended to hit the creature with whatever charm might slow or blind it. Dragons had high magic resistance, and even an old one like this might shrug off many spells, but they had to try. Ah! One of the aurors who had almost fallen shouted suddenly. What is it? Kingsley demanded. On the dragon's back. There's someone on the dragon's back. Kingsley squinted into the smoke-lit gloom and made out a dark figure standing atop the dragon, silhouetted against the hellfire. 140. The Dark Lord struck by lightning. There was someone on the dragon's back. Kingsley's first thought was that it might be a goblin dragon tamer, but the silhouette didn't fit a goblin at all. Goblins are short and squat, their arms almost as long as their bodies. This figure was well-proportioned, a human outline wrapped in robes. Kingsley strained to see the face, but the man on the dragon seemed preoccupied, dodging spells that cut through the flames like burning projectiles and spewed black smoke. The old dragon struggled to evade. Each dark arts curse that glanced off its flanks sent shockwaves through the cavern. Rock chimneys trembled, boulders split, and flying debris peppered the steel tracks like shotgun pellets. Now Kingsley understood the earlier tremor. He was also startled. One wizard's spells were producing shockwaves strong enough to shake all of Gringotts. If Dumbledore were still at Hogwarts and Voldemort hadn't vanished, Kingsley might have sworn the two strongest wizards in the world were fighting down there. Cyrus rode the dragon, the damp cave wind whipping his robes. Minutes earlier, they had been brawling inside a secret vault. Lord Voldemort had hurled a torrent of curses, but none could crack Cyrus's defenses. Likewise, Cyrus's blows had shown little effect on Voldemort. Both had misjudged the other. Then the vault's defenses activated. Giant stone statues rose from the floor and attacked indiscriminately. The statues were no real threat. Both wizards shattered them with spells. But the vault began to collapse, and the dragon panicked, breathing fire. In the chaos, Cyrus blasted the floor beneath Voldemort and cast a counter to the flying charm that bound his foe in place. He leapt onto the dragon and rode out, blasting the vault door so the collapsing structure would bury Voldemort. He hadn't expected it to be that easy. Lord Voldemort broke the flying counter in seconds. He was the inventor of the charm, and tore the rubble apart with a crimson fiendfire that was pure, concentrated rage. He emerged like a living black mist, launching spell after spell as he chased the fleeing pair. Against that blackness, the stalactites of spellfire looked like blinking warning lights. "Fight back, Cyrus! Is that all you've got?" Voldemort taunted, his voice echoing through the cave. "Let me see your ancient magic." He sounded more irritated than enraged. He was annoyed he had failed to take Cyrus quickly, and envious too. The lightning Cyrus had used earlier, ancient, wrapped around his body as a defense, was formidable. Voldemort coveted that power. The Aurors and Kingsley heard him as well. The dark wizard's face, hidden beneath shadow and smoke, was unmistakable. Tom Riddle. All of Gringotts' recent catastrophes seemed to trace back to him. Chamber of Secrets, Azkaban, the Highlands, and now this. The goblins were having none of the Ministry's explanations. One of them bellowed through clenched teeth, fury and grief twisting his features. "It's Tom Riddle, that murderous escapee! He killed our kin and broke into our vault," he roared. "Why didn't you arrest him sooner?" The goblin blamed the Aurors and the wizarding authorities, declaring that if goblins ran the world, wizards would never possess wands, and such breaches would never occur. Kingsley had little time to argue, but he thought there was a grim logic in the goblin's anger. Up in the cavern, the dragon climbed higher, almost to the top. Then a flash. The black shape behind Cyrus unleashed a slashing spell. It struck the dragon's protective charm. Kingsley expected the charm to hold, yet the dragon folded its wings and plummeted. For a moment, he thought it had been hit. Cyrus remained calm. He was steering the descent. Voldemort had been a constant thorn. Cyrus intended to return the favor. He wasn't worried about the dark wizard collapsing the body he'd possessed. Borrowed flesh had limits. A bright black-edged wind slashed by Cyrus's ear. It smelled of metal and made his hair sting. It was like Sectum Sempra, but modified. Fewer blades, far greater power. The scar in the cave's ceiling proved it. Cyrus lashed out. He lashed the dragon with a conjured rope, braced himself, and held a spear of lightning in his other hand. The dragon dove like a battering ram. Cyrus hurled the lightning. Crackling thunder filled the cave, a white-hot spear that became the only light. For a heart-stopping instant, the world was stripped to the thunderous roar and searing light. When the afterimage faded, the cavern was pitch black again. No flames, no dragon, as if none of the spectacle had occurred. But the shattered walls, the falling rubble, and the distant roar told the Aurors the battle had been very real. Cyrus had aimed not simply at Voldemort's body, but at the Lestrange vault. He knew where the Hufflepuff cup was kept. He had learned its location while seeking a key to Vault 12. Conversations in Azkaban and a tip from Lucius Malfoy had set him on the right path. The old dragon, either blinded or exhausted, had crashed into the vault door and stunned itself. The door held firm against its impact. Cyrus leapt to the door and shouted, "Bombarda!" The blast obliterated the barrier. Dust and gold spilled outward like a gust of wind. Inside, from floor to ceiling, the vault overflowed with treasures. Gold coins, goblets, silver armor, spiked furs, vials of potions, and a skull wearing a crown. Everything glittered with enchantments, fiendfire wards, and duplication charms. Touch them, and you would be incinerated. Crash them together, and they would regenerate. The spells were set with skill. Had Cyrus not been warned, he might have suffered for it. "Stunning charm," he muttered, plunging his wand into the floor. The charm spread outward and stripped the enchantments from the coins and gems. He walked across the pile of wealth, metal clinking under his boots, but it was nothing more than ballast. He'd come for one thing. At the center of the vault, on a raised plinth and almost touching the ceiling, sat a small golden cup. Bellatrix had placed it in the most conspicuous spot, a grotesque display of pride. It was modest in size, with a badger engraved on its side and two handles. Cyrus weighed it in his hand. It was solid and true. He didn't destroy it. Destroying an artifact made by the founders felt wasteful when he might study its properties. The cup was rumored to conjure food from nothing, breaking one of the rigid laws of the magical world. If it still worked, it was a marvel. He tucked the goblet into a conjured pocket in his robe and sealed it with a spell so it couldn't slip away. He didn't ignore the other treasure. He remembered a promise to Hermione and the humbler need to balance favors. A few trinkets and gems were already being collected for Christmas. As he stepped out the cave's gloom, his eyes, sharp even in the dark, picked out a pale figure in the deepest pit. Lord Voldemort lay weak and slumped. The lightning Cyrus had unleashed had hurt him, but the main reason for his frailty was apparent. The body he had possessed was failing. Borrowed flesh doesn't hold up forever. Cyrus smiled without warmth and sent another spell streaking from his wand, like a scarlet bolt, like a falling meteor. Voldemort, however, unmade his hold on the corpse and turned into a roiling black mist that reformed instantly into a serpentine face with hate-filled red eyes. "Cyrus, don't think you've won," the voice hissed. Cyrus's hands never stilled. Killing Voldemort outright was impossible now. Something else would be required. He gathered the rubble and rock in the cavern like puppets and crushed them down upon the black mist, imprisoning it where it writhed and slipped through cracks. The mist seeped. Cyrus tightened his grip and transfigured the enclosing rock into an airtight glass bottle. Inside the bottle, the blackness twisted and eddied, searching for any weakness. Cyrus lifted it and held the small prison to his eye. His golden irises stared back at him from the glass. The shadow's face turned toward him, features obscured, but its fury obvious. "Do you like your new home, Lord Voldemort?" Cyrus asked softly. The mist rasped an inhuman sound. For a moment, surging anger seemed to concentrate against the glass, and then, impossibly, a sliver of the shadow filtered through the molecules and seeped out. It bled through like vapor, finding a seam, and drifted away into the cavern, coalescing again into the sinister shape. "You wait, Cyrus," it hissed, reorganizing into a solid snarl. "I will return very soon." Cyrus watched the mist gather and fade into the dark, the bottle cold in his hand and the Hufflepuff cup safe in his robe. Above them, the cave still shook. The battle had not ended, and the world had not finished with Tom Riddle. But for now, one Horcrux was in different hands, and the Dark Lord had been forced to flee, if only temporarily.